Now we're going to turn over to Elizabeth, who will describe cost proposals and the budget templates for Biostasis proposals. Now I should mention that once we're through review and selection and the funded proposals are on contract, Elizabeth is one of the people here at DARPA you will be in direct contact with quite often, as she reviews and manages the financial reporting and the general administration of the program. So listen carefully to what she says and how she says it.
Thank you, Tristan. So as Tristan explained, my name is Elizabeth Kilpatrick, and I'm here to talk about the budget template that you may have noticed was attached to the Biostasis BAA. So I recognize that the technical and scientific personnel for a project typically attend proposers' days, not the grants, financial, or administrative representatives that typically work on the cost proposal. So please note that we are recording this presentation and it will be posted along with the presentation file and the sound from this on the DARPA BAA opportunities page. Again, that link is on slide 42 of this presentation. So you may notice that this slide and the BAA itself lists this template as highly recommended, not required. So before I lose your attention completely, I'd like to talk about the benefits of using this template to respond to the cost proposal requirements of the Biostasis BAA. So the goal of the template is to make it easier for proposers to respond to the Biostasis BAA. In other words, this template helps you be compliant with the cost proposal requirements listed in the BAA. So you can read section 4.2.2 for more details on those requirements. But again, I'd like to emphasize that our goal here is not to make your life harder, but to make it easier and help you be compliant with the BAA. So the list of cost proposal requirements on this slide is taken directly from the BAA. So essentially what we did when coming up with this template is we reviewed all of the cost proposal requirements, some of them are listed here, and we made a list of everything that could be presented in a spreadsheet, and then we put this template together. So as you read this list, if you can put it in Excel, it's in this template. If it can't be put there, it'll be another element of your cost proposal. So in summary, before you kind of decide to make up your mind, just keep in mind that whether or not you choose to use this template, the BAA is going to ask you to provide the cost proposal information listed in section 4.2.2, and this template is going to cover many of those items. So as I said before, the goal of the template is to make it easier for you to be compliant with the cost proposal requirements of the BAA. That being said, we understand that one size does not fit all, so you can absolutely alter and customize this template to reflect the structure of your particular project. However, please do note that we have already formatted the template to reflect the 2-task and 4-phase structure of the Biostasis program. So we also wanted to try and keep this as straightforward and as simple as we could whenever possible. So there's no macros or complicated formulas in the template. The most complex Excel concepts you're going to have to deal with is how to link data within tabs via a formula like sum, or how to link data across tabs, and absolute reference. So you can type any of these concepts into Google or into YouTube, find a 5-minute tutorial, and I really do think it will tell you everything you need to know to understand how to use this template. So lastly, this presentation is definitely not the last word we have to say on the subject. You can contact the Biostasis BAA inbox with any questions you have, and we'll definitely provide a response quickly and with a lot of detail. So without further ado, let's get into the template. So although there are numerous tabs, the template is split up into 3 major sections. There's a high-level summary tab, the detailed data entry tabs, and then other essential information. So I'll go ahead and review each tab in the spreadsheet individually, but I'll start by providing a summary of these 3 major sections. So the high-level summary tabs that are highlighted here in pink provide high-level information about your cost proposal in a few different yet very helpful ways. I'll go through those in a minute. Then if you use the template, you're actually going to spend a majority of your time working with the detailed data entry tabs that are highlighted here in green. So you will essentially enter in the core basic information about the personnel, supplies, equipment, those major building blocks of your proposal, and then they'll be bubbled up and linked to the higher level summary tabs. And then lastly, we have some standalone tabs that will cover information that we need to evaluate both cost realism and then also to award your contract if your proposal is selected for funding. So when you review some of the detailed data entry tabs, like the tabs representing each phase of your project, you might be a little intimidated. But before you get too worried, I'd really like you to pay attention to something called the cell color legend. And so in that, you'll see that gray cells represent cells where you're going to enter in the data, and then the white cells represent formulas. And when you review all of the detailed tabs like the phase tab, you'll notice that there are a lot more white cells than gray cells. So that means that once the template is set up to reflect the specific structure of your project, you're going to spend most of your time simply plugging information into the gray cells. So it's definitely not as intimidating as it may seem at first. Then lastly, I would like to emphasize that this is definitely not your entire cost proposals. Careful reading of section 4.2.2 will give you a clear idea of what constitutes a complete cost proposal. And again, as I said before, the best way to look at it is really that if there's an element of the requirements in section 4.2.2 that could be represented in an Excel spreadsheet, we added it to the template. But there are many elements of a cost proposal like equipment quotes, key personnel justification, or certified cost and pricing justifications that would be better included as part of your PDF Volume 2 cost proposal. So, as I said before, there are four summary tabs. The first is the cost proposal summary tab. It provides high-level information like identifying information for the prime and subcontractors, the period of performance, the cost per major item like task or personnel, and really much of this information will automatically be calculated once you've set up the template for your project. Another summary tab is the summary by phase tab. This provides a summary by phase and task for the major cost elements like personnel, equipment, subcontractors, supplies, and indirect costs. And again, once the template's set up to reflect your specific project, all of this will be automatically calculated for you. Then there is the summary by task tab. Very similar to some of the other ones, the main goal here is to simply show what the cost is overall for each task and subtask. And again, it will roll automatically from all of the more detailed data entry tabs you work with. And then the last summary tab is the milestones and deliverables tab. Of all the elements of the cost proposal template, this tab is really the most closely coupled with the technical proposal because it's going to link the cost by task and subtask to a description of the approach, the exit criteria and metrics, the milestones and deliverables, and then the associated dates with all of that. I can definitely say that the program manager and the technical team find this to be, for them, the most valuable portion of the cost proposal. So now we will talk about the phase tabs. So as I mentioned before, you will spend a majority of your time working with the phase tabs. They definitely may seem complicated and intimidating at first, and my goal here is to emphasize that they are easier to use than they might seem at first. So definitely note that a majority of the cells are white, which means that a majority of the cells are calculated. So once you've set up the template to reflect the specific structure of your project, it's really just a matter of applying effort, quantity, or cost to each subtask, and then the spreadsheet will really do the rest. And then the last thing I'd like to emphasize is that in the actual Excel workbook that you can find on FBO for this template, their last two tabs in there are some examples of the phase tabs, and I put that in there so that you could kind of look under the hood and easily see how everything works together. So this is a summary of the phase tab that I keep talking about. And so there's kind of maybe four major sections to it. You'll notice that this bright blue, darker blue section at the top is just a summary. Really, again, you'll notice majority of the cells here are white, which means they're calculated. It's really gonna calculate much of what you enter in below into a summary for things like personnel. You'll enter in the percentage for your indirect costs, for example, and that will be applied to the whole phase of the program. And then the pink section, that's entering in the identifying information for each cost element. So you'd enter in the person's name for personnel, what their rate might be. In this example, it's $100 or so. And we have similar categories like benefits, supplies, equipment, etc. And then this green section is where you'll really be applying an effort or a quantity for that individual element to a task and subtask. So for example, here with the personnel, you'll notice that the rate is $100. They are working roughly 25% of their time on task 1.1, and so that calculates out to $25. And it's really the same logic is used throughout the spreadsheet. And then the lighter blue section here in the bottom right is just summarizing all of that by task total. So I have some examples here. Again, the goal of this is to really show the people that will really be working with this spreadsheet, like the grants, financial, administrative personnel, how everything works together. So when it comes to personnel, it's really helpful to think about this as applying a percentage of a person's time to each subtask. So in the example provided here, you can see that the PI is working 25% on subtask 1.1, 25% on subtask 1.2, and then 50% on task 1 as a whole. So by entering the PI's rate of $100 and applying 0.25 to subtasks 1.1 and 1.2, the spreadsheet is going to automatically calculate the rest of the information for the PI. And then when it comes to supplies and equipment, it's really helpful to think of this as applying a quantity to each subtask instead of a percentage. So in the example provided here, the individual supply costs $10 for a unit, and then 10 units are being used on the subtask, and then therefore that totals $100. And so again, it's that simple logic that really kind of builds up from a foundation to make this full phase spreadsheet. So, although one of the major goals of the template is to help us and you understand the individual costs for each task and subtask, we definitely understand that there are some costs that don't cleanly fit beneath a particular task. Therefore, we have two separate tasks for both travel and for other direct costs, or ODCs. And the costs you enter into the ODCs and the travel tabs will automatically be rolled up into the phase tabs. So anybody that's done business with DARPA and the DoD before know that it's necessary to provide a detailed cost breakdown and justification for travel. And this spreadsheet is going to cover everything you need to provide to ensure that you have the adequate justification for any travel you propose. Then when it comes to ODCs, our program administrative costs, the tab is going to allow you to put any costs that don't fit to a task or subtask. This includes things like project managers, room rental fees, facility usage rates, or any paper submissions costs. And all we would really encourage you to do is try to use this tab sparingly, not as a way to avoid assigning costs and tasks to, or costs to a task and subtask. Then, as I mentioned in the introduction, there are a few tabs that really aren't linked to anything else, but still contain essential cost proposal information. If your proposal is selected for funding, it's going to be necessary for your contracting agent to obtain all of the information that are included in these tasks. And a good example is the prime labor rate information. So in the phase tabs, we understand how the costs break down to task and subtask, but we don't really understand how the rate will escalate. And that's what one of the goals of this tab is. In addition, there are many different indirect rates on a project, whether you're from university or industry, and there's a tab that will represent just a high-level overview of what those rates are. Then, as Peter mentioned, it's necessary to provide the same level of detail for subcontractors as it is for the prime. And so we have a separate breakout that provides a summary of the subcontractor budget. You'll notice in the phase tab that there is a line to apply subcontractor costs for task and subtask because we want to understand what subcontractor is working on what task. But again, the detailed breakdown of their costs like personnel, supplies, equipment, etc. is all on this tab here. Then this is a pretty straightforward tab, but a very important one, as Peter mentioned, because when it comes to providing funds here within DARPA and ensuring that the performers have the adequate funds to cover the work on their project, it's a bit of a moving target simply because we only get one fiscal year worth of funding at a time, and then many times due to something called the continuing resolution, we only get about 3 to 4 months worth of funding at a time. And so we want to make sure that all of our performers have adequate funding to cover their expenses. And so this is straightforward, but very important to understand what your cost is per month so that if you are selected for funding, we make sure we give you adequate coverage. Then the last tab is the animal and human use tab. I think we'd be majorly surprised if there's any human use on the biostasis program, but definitely possible to have animal use. And so, as Carrie Lewis is going to talk about in a minute, when it comes to working with the Department of Defense and using DoD funds for any animal use, it has some specific rules and regulations. And as a result, we have to clearly understand any costs associated with that work. And so this just provides you with an opportunity to very cleanly and clearly say which tasks have animal use associated with them. So of course, please reach out to us with any questions. We're more than happy to do that. Again, we want this to be a helpful tool for you instead of a hindrance. And so any questions we can answer to help you with that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.